Exploring positionality through art practice, autoethnography and critical event analysis. I live in the landscape that is Lutruwita. This landscape is richly encoded with the hers and his stories of Tasmania's First Peoples. I wish to acknowledge these people, their stories, and their timeless connection with this country. The contents of this presentation include a brief abstract, why this research is important, art and STEM, interdisciplinarity, geometry and art, positionality, methods used, data, observations and some conclusions. The abstract. My PhD study seeks to contribute to interdisciplinary knowledge by investigating geometry and geometric form through 2- and 3-dimensional artworks. I structure the study around 5 themes Bresler identifies in relation to her exploration of interdisciplinarity through interculturality. This paper uses 2 artworks and accompanying autoethnographic sketches to explore one of Bresler's 5 themes, that of positionality. Critical event analysis unpicks the autoethnographic sketches for new or rediscovered knowledge concerning interdisciplinarity. Research is important. I have been reflecting on the learning I have undertaken in my life. Reflection on this learning is what drives my research. My learning has been a patchwork mosaic of experiences, both formal and informal, with much of that experience only later recognised as learning. My skills have developed in different areas of specialisation, both within the arts and between disciplines. I now recognise this experience as interdisciplinary. This recognition of the multiple ways we learn could be particularly pertinent in these COVID days when we need to reconfigure our skills and expertise towards new work and ways of working. We need to see and understand our skills as generic rather than particular. Possibly the greatest skill this interdisciplinary existence has given me is enabling me to be comfortable with not knowing. A second interdisciplinary theme identified in Bresler's work. In my paid work, I have frequently found myself observing what is to me another culture, a culture I have to become familiar with and that I have to learn the language of if I am to be able to complete the tasks attached to the role. In these situations, I have had to learn the value systems, etiquette, and customs of a disciplined culture that may have not been my area of expertise. This disciplined culture learning is also identified by Bresler as significant to successful in an historical moment of rapid change from which we must learn to expand from our discipline and view an individual's skills and experience as bigger than one area of specialisation. Not many people have the luxury of learning one trade, craft or profession which they can stick with throughout their life, and those who do are likely to be the exception rather than the rule. Placing interdisciplinary experience into the public realm creates the possibility for resonance with and connection to the experience of others. This resonance and connection may then trigger reflection, and it is through reflection that we bring awareness to what we know, how we learn, and how and what we think. I am an arts practitioner with experience in ceramics, the performing arts and visual arts. I'm someone who has accepted employment in a variety of projects beginning in educational research. My transition from someone skilled in arts practice into educational research meant crossing from one discipline to another and involved developing new skills. Beginning in education, it was then a small step to move into vocational education and training and later population health. I began to position myself as someone with generic, transferable project skills. This decade, I became involved in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM projects. The emphasis in STEM education is to facilitate learning in STEM, as these disciplines are a focus of government priority. And STEM learning is seen to be essential to national economic development and security. I arrived at this career juncture with STEM from a position that art is underpinned by science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. As I watched the flow of government funding towards STEM, I wanted to challenge the assumption that these STEM subjects could be better learnt in their silo environment where they do not need to compete with non-STEM subjects. The question for me was how to explore the potential of interdisciplinarity between the arts and STEM in a manageable way. STEM itself is a bundle of disciplines, subdisciplines, and specialisation areas subject to its own value hierarchy. Knowing that geometry contributed to my own art practice, I decided it was well placed to represent STEM. This made the study an exploration of interdisciplinarity through geometry and art. Article, Interdisciplinary Intercultural Travels, Mapping a Spectrum of Researcher Experiences, Bresler uses the metaphor of intercultural travel as a way to explore her observations of working in an interdisciplinary way. She identifies 5 themes that can arise from the intercultural experience and which, she suggests, can be applied to interdisciplinarity. These 5 themes are positionality, the potential, promises and perils of intercultural travel, enabling awareness of the larger picture, border crossing, and being comfortable with unknowing. In my research, these 5 themes form the framework for my exploration of interdisciplinarity. I am exploring them using art practice and autoethnographic documentation. Positionality is the focus of this paper, but first a look at the 2 discipline areas I have chosen for interdisciplinary exploration. Art. Geometry is regarded as both a science for investigating the properties and relations of magnitudes in space, as lines, surfaces, and solids, and as a branch of mathematics. I have selected Euclidean geometry because of its capacity to speak to both STEM and art practitioners, and because my artwork usually includes some aspect of geometry or geometric form. Geometry, geometric form, and geometric references occur frequently in the visual arts. During the first half of the 20th century, geometric form became the subject matter of many artists, such as Mary Swansea. The work produced by the Bauhaus heavily references geometry and geometric form. Geometry is also apparent in the work of contemporary artists. Landgreen. Example, Cornelia Parker. Positionality has many positions. This image is of a maquette for a proposed artwork titled Bundle of Acrylic Rods. It took form as I tried to think of how I could visually represent geometric form in an exhibition space. I imagined a dark space containing a random bundle of rods that are connected together. As you walk around such an installation, you might see different geometric forms, including triangle, square, and rhombus. Positionality is about where we stand in relationship to something. One of my supervisors, a science educator, suggested that a person with a science background is likely to approach the artwork differently to an artist, so it can also be about what we bring with us. Positions of positionality that I have so far identified include your temporal location in time, which could be seen as your demographic and quantitative data. Age, race, location, gender, class, profession, belief system, and so on. Your position in relation to something else, an idea or object, how you are positioned by others, and how you position yourself. Then there is one's positionality as a researcher. This positionality involves one's own biases and blind spots. All researchers are limited by these, and they need to be acknowledged. For this research, I combine the methods of arts-based research and autoethnography. The arts-based research is the making, and the autoethnography is the documenting and reflecting. I then use critical event analysis to identify the themes that are of significance to the interdisciplinary focus of this study. The arts-based research will culminate in an exhibition, including a large installation, two-dimensional works, and some smaller three-scale dimensional works, including the acrylic rods, and a work titled It Is Not a Parallelogram. Both these works contribute to this presentation. Autoethnography extrapolates from the individual experience to the cultural. Using an autoethnographic approach allows me to access the data of my experience to stimulate reflection on the broader social context. Autoethnographic accounts accompany each artwork and outline the artwork conception, making, and associated reflections during and subsequent to the making process. Critical event analysis is used to analyse the data. Critical event themes will be identified for their potential contribution to our knowledge of interdisciplinarity arising from the identification of junctures, intersections, and connections between geometry and the art practice. Two artworks that contribute to the data for this presentation are the previously mentioned bundle of acrylic rods and this platter, which I commenced at the beginning of this PhD. I used it as a way to limber up and reconnect with clay. I called it a parallelogram. The original ceramic form became the key for a plaster mould, which I could then use to slip cast multiple forms. It felt like I was picking up where I left off 25 years ago. It Is Not a Parallelogram was conceived, though it was not yet baptized. What follows is part of an autoethnographic sketch that accompanies the platter pictured here. Critical incidents, most recently on the day of my confirmation of candidature. I had documented the stages of the platter's development, with the platter and associated images acting as a visual anchor to the PhD, reminding me and my readers of my contention that ceramics involve all of the STEM subjects. It also visually represents my preoccupation with geometry, my interest in lines and angles, providing visual evidence of what I am grappling with. I included the images in each iteration of my COC documentation. The significant day arrived. A number of mathematics educators attended. I presented and discussion followed. The video conference concluded and those present in the room departed. All except one remaining mathematics educator who, leafing through my documentation, came to the page with the platter. "I have to tell you, Suzanne, that is not a parallelogram." "What do you mean it's not a parallelogram?" "A parallelogram has straight lines that run parallel." "It's got angles." "But it's not a parallelogram. It's a mistake many first-year mathematics teachers might make." The graphic sketch relates to the acrylic rods. I don't recall when the concept for this work arose, just that I was trying to put into visual format the concepts I was struggling with. If this was a PhD about geometry and art, then how could I present geometry visually? Many geometric forms are made up of straight lines. If I collected a random bundle of straight lines, what sort of geometric forms might they create in space? Then stepped up to think about the aesthetic appeal of the work. I had previously undertaken a public art project that included LEDs and a print on glass. An important aspect of my art practice. How can I make it pleasing on the eye, and how to invite the viewer in? I imagined acrylic rods in a dark space with LED lights attached at one end. The completed object could be suspended from the ceiling, and its luminescence would draw the viewer in. As the viewer walks about the object, different geometric forms would come in and out of view. Some observations. Each of these works have already collected about them ideas and representations that weren't present in their original conception or execution. These include 1. Different disciplines place different emphases on the meanings contained in or represented by an object. It is not a parallelogram, represents a discipline boundary. In my intercultural journey, I had encountered an unanticipated peril when I strayed past the boundary of the visual arts and into the territory of mathematics educators. Question. If I arrange a number of platters in a single artwork, does it then become a parallelogram? Are the parallel straight lines required of a parallelogram formed by the framing of the overall artwork rather than the individual components of that work? It was with hindsight, grappling with Bresler's 5 themes and working out how to structure this PhD, that I realised that the acrylic rods concept spoke literally to positionality. What the viewer sees changes as they move about the object. What the viewer sees depends not only on their position in the exhibition space, but is also founded in the experience they bring into the room. Exploring the interdisciplinarity of geometry and art means that my position, my bias as an artist, will emphasise aesthetic over the accuracy of the geometry terminology. However, I do now know more, and this gives me greater awareness of the differences in discipline emphasis on something like a geometric form. Something about my positionality. My positionality relevant to this study includes a sense of outsideness in relation to STEM. And whilst I am confident in my experience as an arts practitioner, there is also a degree of outsideness in relation to the arts as they sit within the academic arena. My positionality involves a broad skill set, which feels at times at odds with the specialisation focus that makes up so much of the higher education environment. This sense of outsideness can involve a degree of scepticism directed towards the cultures I observe. My positionality also involves a sense of at-homeness with geometry, even though I apply it differently to the way a mathematics educator might. So my lived experiences of both outsideness and feeling at home can contribute to a productive application of such positionality. This research process is allowing me to scrutinise my own position, draw on its advantages, and accept its limitations. Thank you.